Good morning and welcome to another edition of COVID Calls. Today we're going to have a special program all about Malta's Financial Services Authority, MFSA. So we have a number of people on the program who work at MFSA and are going to be talking about how MFSA is coping with the COVID situation. More importantly, how MFSA is dealing with the regulatory issues that Malta is facing and the big tests we're facing in terms of our effectiveness at fighting financial crime and other matters. So I just want to bring on to start off with Mr. Edward Grech, the head of enforcement, and Ms. Emily Benson, from head of conduct supervision. Can you both hear me?
Yes. Good morning.
Emily, can you hear us? No, there's a problem with Emily, so I'll just move up for now and she can rejoin. So I'll start with you, Edward. Edward, how difficult is enforcement? You're head of enforcement, right? How difficult is enforcement in a nation state like Malta, where too many people know too many people? Does it get a bit tricky to do that?
The MFSA, as is established by law, is an independent body, and there are structures in place, governance structures, which ensure that it's completely independent and any possible conflicts of interest are dealt with. So the enforcement process per se, there's a process which involves not individuals who decide whether or not enforcement action should be taken, but a college of individuals. So decisions as to whether enforcement action should be taken or not is taken collectively, meaning that not one single person can determine whether an enforcement action has or has not should not be taken. So the process is fair, and we aim to apply the laws and ensure that whoever does not adhere to the applicable requirements is looked at and enforcement action is considered in that case.
We know that politics is sometimes a notorious enemy of enforcement in Malta. I know you're saying you do things fairly and things like that, but are there issues, are there political realities and constraints when it comes to enforcement in Malta?
So I hinted to the internal structures of the MFSA. There are functions like the internal audit function, which ensures that we adhere to our own internal procedures, and also we ensure that we apply our powers fairly. There are also, as I mentioned, the different stages of the enforcement process. So the process is set in a way which allows consistency and fairness in the application of enforcement action.
Okay. So I know Emily has joined us now. Emily, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much for being on the program. Sorry about the technical difficulties before. I just wanted to ask you to get started. What is your role? What is the role of conduct supervision? You're head of conduct supervision. What is your role when it comes to bringing Malta in line with Moneyval recommendations?
Well, that's two questions. So conduct supervision is fundamentally about the protection of the consumer in Malta. The conduct in conduct supervision comes from the conduct of business. So we regulate both the products that firms manufacture, but we also regulate the way they distribute, the way they sell those products. And so that bit of the process is my responsibility, to make sure the way they sell the products and their relationships with consumers, they're compliant. As regards I have a second role in my team. Also sits the team that looks after the trustees and corporate service providers in Malta, and so I also have responsibility for those that are currently authorised. Vis-a-vis Moneyval, from my perspective, it's got two lenses. One is the way in which we supervise firms, how we determine which firms we need to look at more closely, risk-based supervision, and how we carry out that supervision, what we look at when we're carrying out that supervision. So Moneyval, as you know, has a great emphasis on anti-money laundering and countering terrorism, the financing of terrorism. And therefore, we're more and more integrating in that perspective into our day-to-day work. So it's, if you like, when we go into the firm, we keep it on our radar as something that we're aware of. We've got specialist units within the MFSA who are responsible for that as well. But my team now has that on their radar when they're out and about.
Okay, so just to explain a bit the whole Moneyval situation to the viewers as well, Malta's facing this big test, which which could see Malta getting grey listed or blacklisted if we don't prove our effectiveness in fighting financial crime, right? So Edward, one of the issues seems to be enforcement, right? In the sense that it seems that we have a lot of structures and rules in place and our regulation is good, but very few arrests or punishments or actually getting people to justice. Has any progress been registered on this point?
So definitely on this case, and during this year, there has been considerable progress in terms of concluding and finalizing enforcement action in respect to entities or individuals who have breached the applicable requirements. This in light of considerable development, considerable investment, which has been undertaken in both the human resources and IT, which allowed for greater efficiency in bringing to closure certain cases, certain investigations. This, in our case, so the MFSA is the authority responsible for ensuring adherence with financial regulation. And the result of our enforcement action is our administrative action, which is taken against these individuals or entities. When there are issues which are criminal in nature, we collaborate closely with the FIU and the Malta Police and provide and support them in carrying out their own investigations.
But is it has COVID affected your enforcement capabilities in any way? I know that a lot of people are working remotely now. I believe MFSA is also doing a lot of remote working. How difficult has it been to keep up the pressure and the efforts on that point?
In our case, in the case of enforcement, I believe it has this situation has created opportunities and greater efficiency in finalizing and concluding investigations and taking enforcement action. So to be honest, during these first months of the year, so we've registered considerable number of cases. So we have concluded a good number of cases, now in the region of 15 cases closed already up to date on these first 5 months. So I believe COVID has presented certain challenges, but these have been well tackled by the MFSA with timely investment in IT infrastructure, and also in a concerted effort by all individuals, all officials of the authority, which are focused in meeting the Moneyval requirements and other targets set by international bodies to achieve efficiency and effectiveness in our work.
Okay, and have you seen any? Have you had to protect citizens from any scams in recent weeks as well? Have there been any particular scams that you've been fighting in relation to COVID?
So scams directly related to COVID, I'm not aware of any particular scam related to COVID. However, since COVID has started, we've noticed a considerable increase in the number of scams which have been identified by the MFSA. So in reaction to that, we seek to constantly try to educate the public out there to make sure that they, whenever they're choosing to obtain a financial service, either investment service or other services, they need to go to entities which are licensed and authorized by the MFSA. That per se offers a certain level of protection and assurance that those entities need to follow certain rules. So we've seen a growing number of entities, either cloned companies or entities, even at times without having a company backing them, but simply an internet address, which is marketed to people through social media, Facebook, Instagram, and what have you, and lure them into placing money into investments which turn out to be fraudulent. So we are continuously trying to educate the people out there by issuing notices, issuing warnings against specific entities. Also, there's an email, a contact, which is available to the public through our website or through.
What is that email, or where should people go to?
There's a contact us page on our website, mfsa.mt. Through this link, individuals, general public can simply place their concern with respect to anything related to financial services, and there will be a team of people who would be looking into that matter and taking action where appropriate.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Edward. I just want to move on to Emily now, who I think can hear us well again. Emily?
Yes, certainly I can.
Okay, so we're talking to you a bit before about conduct supervision and compliance standards. How is MFSA managing to raise compliance standards? So, you know, I'd like to know how long you've been there as well, and what you've been seeing.
Well, I think I've come very recently, in that I came on the 1st of March, and around the 14th of March, 15th of March, we went into full COVID panic, and I think I just lost you.
No, you haven't. You can keep talking. I can hear you. Hello? No, okay. I had an issue with with Emily. So tell you what, I'm going to bring on someone else to the program. Actually, Emily, are you back?
I'm back. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
Don't worry.
So so we went into full COVID crisis management when I was 2 weeks into the job. So that was definitely a baptism by fire. In terms of how we're working to raise standards, we're engaging a lot with firms to communicate our expectations. And since I arrived, we've put out a lot of communications from firms, and firms have remarked how they're getting much more out of the MFSA. And then we engage with individuals a lot when they're being approved to come into firms. We interview them, we check their competence. And then we're also conducting an increasing number of visits to firms each year on year. We've been setting higher and higher inspection targets. And we're conducting those visits now all remotely, of course, just the way we are today. We're becoming very, very visible with firms and doing an awful lot of work reviewing what they've got in place and communicating with them regarding that.
Talking about COVID, I know that, you know, with a looming economic crisis, I imagine your job becomes harder. And I say this because, you know, there's going to be politicians pushing for economic growth at the expense of, you know, possibly at the expense of not doing things by the book. Do you think that might happen?
I couldn't really comment on what politicians are going to do, but what I would say is that I know from years of experience that when you raise standards, you get economic improvement, you get value, you get quality, and actually the drive to quality brings better profitability and stronger economic growth. So although you hear the argument often that, you know, the burden of compliance and the costs of compliance, in the long run, you get a much better, more valuable quality market. And I think that's definitely where Malta's going, to move into the high quality market.
And how important are people to get this done? How important are people to the MFSA in terms of recruitment? You know,
we are the people. I mean, we are nothing but the people. We are no better than the people who work here. And I have to say, coming from another jurisdiction, I mean, I'm very, very impressed with the quality of the people here. Their quality, their engagement, their analysis, the way they think. They're early adopters. So I can't speak too highly of the quality of the people I've met in the MFSA.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work. I want to move on, talking about people, I want to move on to Calvin Kassar, who is head of people, and to Dave Peacock, head of banking supervision. Can you hear me, Calvin? I think we have, okay, yes, you're on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
And David, can you hear me as well? David? Okay, we've got an issue with David's thing, but let's start with you then, Calvin. So you are head of people. When it comes to recruitment at MFSA, is it difficult for MFSA to compete with the salaries and conditions in the private sector?
I would say that based out of needs, the MFSA has been growing substantially in the past months. So we've grown by over 25%. So we started 2019 at around 300 employees, and now we're past our 400. It's been a challenge to grow the workforce, mainly because of supply-demand issues, no? So it literally comes down to economic factors in this. If you had to ask me on the challenges, on the growth, and whether salary plays a part, I would say that yes, definitely people work to earn money, but at the same time I also think that the MFSA offers something that is a bit different and a bit special compared to other propositions and offerings in financial services.
How do you attract the right people in that sense?
Yes, we have looked to get people on board who are driven, energetic. They want to come in and make a difference here. And what we offer here, we're aware that we and we do not wish to compete with the private industry in terms of salary, but what the MFSA offers are opportunities for learning, development, exposure. I would say that we are one of the few organizations in the country where people can really learn and grow in a wide range of areas and subjects. So in the conversation today, we're bringing in people from banking supervision, from conduct. We supervise financial services in general, so this includes insurance, securities, markets, the fintech space, so it's quite rich and diverse. And people can come in here at the MFSA and literally build a career, developing specialization and depth in understanding, or actually they also have the opportunity to get breadth of knowledge across the different areas. Again, one of our special things is the opportunity to participate and to collaborate with the other European supervisory authorities. So we're not just spectators to what happens in Europe, but we are active contributors, and we have our people sitting at the table where the European legislation and financial services is being formulated, chipping in, contributing, and bringing forward the Maltese agenda. So I think that's very special, and people coming in at the MFSA have the opportunity to contribute to economic development for the country, but also at a wider level, at a European level. Okay. So I think that is pretty much special.
David, can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, that's great. So you're the head of banking supervision. I want to bring you into this discussion as well. How would you describe the state of the banking sector in Malta? What are the main pain points that you've identified that you have needed to work on?
Well, that's right. So Malta is a sort of a small country, but it's got quite a few banks actually, and they're not homogenous. The sector comprises quite a few different types of institutions, and in general terms, they seem to be coping with the current crisis quite well. But there's quite a few things that banks here in Malta, probably in common with other countries, need to address. I mean, one of the challenges is making sure you've got the right leaders for the executive or to sit on the board to actually run the banks, and that means investing in people's development. The other is to make sure that you've got viable business models and can control your costs as well. And Malta offers a good opportunity for banks to do that. But there are two significant challenges coming onto the agenda for all banks, and firms here in Malta will need to meet them too. That's making sure that not only are they financially resilient, but they're operationally resilient, cyber attacks and things like that. And the other is management of data. All firms, including banks, need to make sure that they've got the right processes in place to manage data.
Now we know that Malta has had some negative experiences when it comes to banks. We know we've heard a lot about Pilatus Bank, we've heard a lot about Sata Bank. How much has that damaged our name, and is there any kind of positive outcome from those stories?
Well, it would be disingenuous of me to say that it doesn't have an impact on Malta's reputation. But what really counts, I think, when you face challenges like that is how you react. And the MFSA has coped with the challenges that's presented. Quite a lot of additional work and demand on the authority very well, and that's a tribute to the team. And Malta itself as a jurisdiction then needs to move forward with a plan. And at the MFSA here, we're certainly improving the quality of our banking supervisory approach, bringing in new people, and developing the communications with the banking sector to make sure that the supervisory agenda and regulatory standards are improved. And I've certainly got a plan to be more engaged with the sector as we take that agenda forward.
You've only been here for a few months, right? And you worked. You have extensive experience in the UK's Financial Services Authority. How does Malta compare to the UK?
It's definitely smaller. London is a very big banking market with obviously quite a lot of different firms. I mean, the main difference here in Malta, of course, is that we're part of the single supervisory mechanism. So we cooperate a lot with the European Central Bank in terms of the supervision of our firms. That means we end up in discussions with Frankfurt, but it also means that we have access to the resources and knowledge that is in the ECB to help us in our supervisory approach here. The MFSA, obviously a much smaller organisation, but it's been very welcoming since I arrived in February. And it has been an interesting time for me to arrive because I arrived and then we more or less immediately went into lockdown. So I've met most of my team through the sort of computer, but and indeed colleagues out there in the industry. But I think we're coping well.
Okay. Going back to banks in general, is it fair to say that that banks in Malta are unnecessarily conservative, especially when it comes to opening bank accounts and lending? There's a lot of people who complain, especially foreigners coming to Malta, that they can't open bank accounts. There are entire industries which Malta has pushed forward, and then banks aren't opening accounts for those industries. What's going on there?
Well, look, I mean, the regulations aren't different here in Malta to anywhere else. So I'm not sure it's a question exclusively about the risk appetite of banks. There is a sort of an ecosystem here which influences the way in which banks can onboard customers, whether it's lending to them or giving them an account. So I think you have to look at the issue in the round. And I guess a couple of things to note there, really. I mean, one is the proportion of the Maltese economy that is made up of some of those specialised industries that potentially do have some different risk factors is higher here than it is elsewhere. So I think we need to sort of think about that, and we also need to think about the sort of making sure that we've got the right standards of transparency, but then controls in the bank for onboarding customers as well. So I think it's something that we're going to need to tackle in a sort of holistic way, rather than just say it's about the bank's conservative risk appetite.
And what about the US correspondent banks? I know that Malta has had some issues over there where we've lost most, if not all, of our US dollar correspondent banks. What is that problem, if you can explain it in simple terms to the public, and how can it be tackled?
Sure. So, I mean, all banks, including those providing services in dollars, so when you want to pay something and it goes through the dollar network, you have to have that correspondent bank. And all banks that provide those services then operate under the watchful eye of the US regulators. And in order to monitor their risk, they sometimes have to have teams on the ground. And in small jurisdictions like Malta, they've pulled back from that. So they're not then in a position to offer the kind of services to banks here in Malta that other jurisdictions get. We need to work with the banks and we need to work with international regulators and the IMF, but including the sort of money laundering regulators around the world as well, to make sure that the infrastructure can be improved here in Malta to service the needs when we need to use the dollar clearing system.
Okay, I just want to make sure Calvin can hear me, because I'd like to bring him back onto the also talk about the cultural change that FSA has undergone. Calvin, can you hear me?
Yes, Chris.
Okay. I know you've been at MFSA since 2017. What are the biggest cultural changes that you have led, in your role as head of people and culture, in this time, in these past few years?
I would say that over these months we've worked to push different aspects to a general shift in mindset, which is tied to developing a sense of flexibility, pushing towards a focus on results and outcomes. I believe that the MFSA has come in a position where we really put our employees at the center of our change program. We recognize, as you mentioned at the beginning, that with Emily, that we can achieve results only through our people, and we have looked to get on board top talent within the authority. So we wanted to make sure that we have the best people on board, but we also want to make sure that we actually provide the learning and training opportunities for these people to grow and develop. So this has meant important investment in supporting our employees through their learning experience, through the learning journey, and this has meant substantial investment on the training side. We're currently working to launch our internal academy within the MFSA, which again will be a key enabler to help our employees grow and develop. So supervision is a pretty specific area on financial services, and we recognize that even people coming out with very valid qualifications from universities still have a learning pathway to take to become effective supervisors. And as MFSA, we're focused in actually providing the pathways and opportunities for the employees to grow.
It's interesting, and we're seeing on this program as well, there's a number of non-Maltese talent coming to the MFSA, both being attracted to the MFSA and being sought by the MFSA as well, right? Is that something to do as well with the more rigorous scrutiny that Malta is undergoing?
Yes, definitely. But again, it is linked to our change agenda. So again, diversity is one of the key pillars that we are pushing as people and culture internally within the MFSA. Again, going back to 2017, when I joined, we had around 6-7 foreign nationals working at the MFSA. In 2019, we had our 50th non-Maltese national join the authority, and what this has meant, rather than just a simple internationalization of the workforce, it has also meant that there has been a growing opportunity to bring in people on board with different perspectives, different experiences, viewpoints, and ways of doing supervision, which has been, again, an amazing learning experience. And this allows a better quality exchange and work to be carried out.
I just have two more questions because we need to round up the program soon. But first of all, I want to know how important technology has been in this change agenda that you are driving.
Again, technology has been key, and if anything, the COVID experience has served to reinforce this message. So the authority has been investing substantially in infrastructure, hardware, but also in tools to enable effective supervision to be carried out. Again, this features top in the agenda, in the MFSA vision, and it has been pretty much validated in the current COVID situation, because practically the tools have enabled work to continue to be undertaken. So granted, COVID has brought about an important disruption, which as people and culture have been deeply involved in, but at the same time, technology has enabled work to continue going on. So through remote working tools, through the facilities we have provided, we can still carry out supervision, we can still carry out visits, we can still interact effectively with license holders, engage and interact. And in a way, possibly missing out on some aspects, but gaining as well a bit more in other ones. So technology has been an enabler, it has allowed us to continue working, but it will also allow us to carry out more effective supervision in the future.
So the million-dollar question that I think a lot of businesses are facing right now is, are you going to continue with this remote working environment, or are you planning going back to the office and getting back to normal, or rather, what is your new normal going to look like?
I definitely cannot see us going back to a similar situation that we had just a couple of months back, at least until a vaccine is made available. But the country is actually taking steps to move towards a new normal, so increasing opportunities for exchange and for effectiveness in work to be carried out, but taking precautionary measures. So I would say that within the whole scenario, MFSA has been very prudent. It has put health first, and it will continue doing so. I also look forward to the possibility eventually of having people return to the office to interact in a face-to-face way. But as I said, we want to do it in a safe and in a way that protects the employees' well-being, basically.
Thank you very, very much, Calvin. Thank you to all the other people who joined the show. We had Edward Grech, Head of Enforcement in the beginning. We had Emily Benson, Head of Conduct. We also had David Ecott, Head of Banking Supervision. That's all we've got for you today. Today was COVID Calls, all about the MFSA, Malta's Financial Services Authority, and everything the organization is doing to help Malta's reputation, help Malta fight financial crime, and also make sure Malta passes its upcoming Moneyval test, which will be a bit of quite a game changer in terms of Malta's strength and reputation. So thank you for following COVID Calls again. I've been your host, Chris Perugine, and we'll be with you tomorrow to discuss remote working and whether we should be returning to the office.